Okay guys, so this video is going to be looking at the poem Love by Eavan Boland. So before we go into analysis of the poem itself, I want to think, how do you think a relationship between a married couple might change over time that they might be together? Okay, so we're looking in this poem at Boland's marriage, her relationship with her husband, which, she's been with her husband for an extended period of time. How do you think the relationship might have changed over that period of time? As objectives today, we want to understand the relationship which is defined in the poem, and be able to, think about why the feelings that she's having and expressing and why they are there, and analyse how the love in the relationship changes and develops. Okay, so over time, when we're looking at people who are married for in long-term relationships for extended period, for years and years and years, really what we might expect to see is, well, there's a number of things. First of all, we might expect that the initial romance might kind of fade away. The buying flowers, going on romantic dates and all that, the romance and stuff may become a little bit less of a feature of the relationship. I'm not saying that it always goes away, but maybe it's just not quite to the forefront in the same way it is when we're looking at poetry where people have just met and new blossoming romances. However, we do also see levels of trust and levels of care going up, and especially honesty, that people are very, very honest and very much themselves, and there can be a lot of loyalty. Okay, so those kind of emotions, those kind of ideas come much more to the forefront when we look at a relationship that's been going on for a long period of time. Alright, so we're going to look at the poem itself first. So, love. Dark falls in this midwestern town, where once we lived when myths collided. Dusk has hidden the bridge in the river, which slides and deepens to become the water the hero crossed on his way to hell. Not far from here is our old apartment. We had a kitchen and an Amish table. We had a view, and we discovered there that love had the feathers and muscle of wings, and had come to live with us, a brother of fire and air. We had 2 infant children, one of whom was touched by death in this town, and spared. And when the hero was hailed by his comrades in hell, their mouths opened and their voices failed, and there was no knowing what they would have asked about a life they had shared and lost. I am your wife. It was years ago. Our child is healed. We love each other still. Across our day-to-day and ordinary distances we speak plainly. We hear each other clearly. And yet I want to return to you on the bridge of the Ira River as you were, with snow on the shoulders of your coat and a car passing with its headlights on. I see you as a hero in a text, the image blazing and the edges gilded, and I long to cry out the epic question, my dear companion. Will we ever live so intensely again? Will love come to us again and be so formidable at rest it offered us ascension even to look at him? For words are shadows and you cannot hear me. You walk away and I cannot follow. Okay, so first impressions, what we want to think about here is, from your first reading of the poem, what emotions are jumping out at you, and do any particular lines or moments from the poem stand out in particular. So I'm going to flick back over to the poem, and I'm going to suggest just pause here for 2 or 3 minutes, read through the poem a few times. Remember, it's really important to have an excellent familiarity with poems before we go into deeper analysis. Okay, so just pause here for 2 minutes. Okay, so when we look at the questions, the first question I asked was, what emotions jump out at you? And then we're going to look at any particular lines or moments. And the emotion that we're going to look at is, love is very much to the forefront of this poem. Okay, there's also a sense of loss or maybe desperation and a questioning of the nature of their love. Okay, there's a bit of nostalgia coming through and looking back to the past. Lines that really stand out to most people in the poem. In the first line we see, some people see the line where he says the hero crossed on his way to hell, and this is a reference to Greek mythology, which we will discuss in a few minutes. We might also see the line, we had 2 infant children, one of whom was touched by death. Okay, that makes us maybe question what happened to their child. We want, it draws us into the poem. We want to know a bit more about it. It's a very personal moment, and Boland is kind of giving us that to draw us in and to show that we are very much part of our personal life here. She's giving us an insight into our personal life. The one that really stands out to most people, though, is I am your wife. It was years ago. Okay, and that's an important structural feature here. Okay, we can see it as soon as we look at the poem. We can see those 2 lines standing out due to the fact that they are so short. compared to the rest of the poem. Okay, and they are simple, straightforward statements, and that is what the poet intends them to be. But we will get to that in a bit more detail. Okay, so that's really the main lines that kind of stand out to people. So, summary and key aspects of this poem. The poem is deeply personal. Okay, it's very personal to the poet, and she examines aspects of her relationship with her husband, especially ones that may not be the way that she wishes them to be. Okay, so she's really letting us into her life here. She's inviting us into her life, and it's very much a personal exploration that she's going through. She's explicit in the fact that although the love between her and her husband has changed, it's not gone. She is simply trying to understand a new love. They still love each other immensely. That's very clear from her. She still has huge amounts of love for her husband. She longs maybe for a passion and romance of younger years. She longs, maybe she feels not quite as connected to him as she may wish to be. So, things to remember, it is deeply personal. There is reference to Greek mythology. We're going to go into that in a second. There is the banality of intent life, that they're happy and that can be quite boring. There's no drama in life. And there's the nature of love and how it evolves in life. So we're going to look at the poem in a few different sections. At the start of the poem, we're going to look at the first two stanzas. Dark falls in this midwestern town, where once we lived when myths collided. Dust has hidden the bridge in the river, which slides and deepens to become the water the hero crossed on his way to hell. Not far from here was our old apartment. We had a kitchen and an Amish table. We had a view, and we discovered there love had a feather and muscle of wings, and had come to live with us, a brother of fire and air. So a few questions to think about. What do you think is the overall tone in the opening stanzas, and what makes you think this? Right. You might also want to think, the poet makes reference to Greek mythology. Can you find where she does this, and what is the reason for making such a reference? Okay, so pause here for a minute and think about those questions. Okay, so the first question, the overall tone, we're going to look at a few key words here. We're going to look at the words dark and dusk. Okay, very much imagery of the end of the day. Okay, imagery of tiredness, maybe, imagery of exhaustion, imagery of things coming to an end. Okay, so the tone maybe is somewhat downhearted here. Right, this slides and deepens. Okay, the idea of going down to hell, things are much darker maybe than they would have been at the start. So possibly there's a bit of confusion. She feels lost in the relationship. Okay, there's a sense that things are not as bright and open as they may once have been. There is a nostalgia very much. Okay, not far from here is our old apartment, and she recalls what the apartment was, and she points out that here we discovered that love had feathers and muscle of wings. So she's very much looking to this idea of the love that they experienced there being a beautiful form of love. The reference to Greek mythology here is in that the hero crossed on his way to hell. So we could be looking at a few different myths here. There's the Aeneid, and Aeneas goes into the underworld, goes to hell. We could also be looking at the idea of Orpheus and Eurydice, where Orpheus goes to hell to rescue Eurydice and bring her back. Okay, but that's going to come up a little bit more as we go on. What we do need to know here is that maybe what we need to think about here is, why is she doing this? And usually when we see people referring to these Greek mythologies, it can be to show a universality to the topics that they're discussing. That it's not just personal, it's something that's been discussed throughout history and maybe broadens up the audience to the piece. So there's a lot of notes to go through here. We'll go through them one at a time. So if we start up with the first note, the imagery at the beginning of this poem goes against our usual expectations of what we would expect to be connected with love. So this is not going to be our bright, happy, oh isn't everything wonderful type of love. The dark and the dusk could suggest to us an end of love, or definitely an end or change in the relationship. Okay? The use of the words myths suggests the love in the poem was not real, but merely imagined or hoped for. Maybe she's questioning the nature of their love. Okay? It's definitely a myth. Maybe that initial love that she's talking about is dying, that romantic love, maybe that was a myth and wasn't true love, and what she's experiencing now is true love. Yeah. The dusk is hidden in the bridge. The bridge may be a metaphor for the emotional support which allowed the lovers to pass over the turbulence in their relationship. But now that the bridge is gone, perhaps they are having to examine the relationship in more detail. Maybe they cannot go, they don't have that bridge leaping over the difficulties in the relationship, and they actually have to examine the difficulties. So it didn't suggest they no longer overcome their difficulties. She could see difficulties and overcoming them as just part of a relationship, though. This may be more a positive, a healthy part of the relationship, that she now wants to really look at their relationship and see how they can be improved. In reference to the hero and the river alludes to Greek mythology. So the river being spoken about here is the river Styx, which the dead crossed to get into Hades. So this is the river. When the Greeks believed when you died, you went down into the underworld via the river Styx. So you would pay a ferryman Charon to bring you across the river Styx to the underworld, to Hades, where you would be judged, and then you go to the fields of Elysium, where you go to Tartarus, or your afterlife is decided. Okay, but it may be referring to Hercules also, as I mentioned at the start, or it could be Orpheus, as I already mentioned. As we move into the second one, she starts listing some of their past. There's a nostalgia for what their love once was. Maybe we could be looking at, is she somewhat afraid of how their love is changing? Love is personified in the poem. We have to talk about personification here, alright, and it is treated as something which acts upon the couple. I'll just point out here two really important features in this poem would be allusion in terms of the references to Greek mythology, but also personification in terms of how she speaks about love. Love is then compared to the elements from ancient Greece. It is therefore an extremely powerful force, or brother of fire and air. She's saying love is equal to these base elements. Okay, so in Greek mythology, in Greek understanding, they had the four elements of fire, air, earth, and water. Here she is saying that love is one with them. It gives it a huge amount of power and importance in life. But despite everything, in the darkness, in the dark imagery and everything like that, there was definitely a fondness in the opening stanza. She's remembering things in a fond way. Right. So you might want to explain why the poet emphasises the apartment was old and they had an homage table. This could be looking at the lack of material wealth, and that was not important to them, that their love could overcome that lack of material wealth. There is an initial impression of love established. What is the initial impression of love established seen? And it's very much of a strong love, but we are worried about it because of that darkness and the dusk that's being mentioned. Right, if we move into the middle of the poem, we get two infant children, one of whom was touched by death in this town and spared. And when the hero was hailed by his comrades in hell, their mouths opened and their voices failed, and there is no knowing what they would have asked about a life they had shared and lost. I am your wife. It was years ago. Our child is healed, we love each other still. Across our day-to-day and ordinary distances we speak plainly, we hear each other clearly. And yet I want to return to you on the bridge of the Ira River as you were, with snow on the shoulders of your coat, and a car passing with its headlights on. So we want to think, what does she tell us happened to one of her children here, okay, when it was touched by death, okay, and how has their relationship changed from how it was represented at the beginning of the poem. So again, pause here and read through these few stanzas and have a think about them yourselves. So, what we're really looking at here, what she tells happened to children, when she says the child was touched by death, the child doesn't actually die. We know from her real life, she did have a child who got very, very ill. Now, having a child get incredibly ill is very important here. It's possibly the bridge over the troubles of their relationship, that they were united in trying to help around their child, and that formed a bridge, and they didn't have to think about their relationship. They were just there for each other around this moment. We also learn that the relationship, what's changed is, she's saying that things have become ordinary, things have become very plain. They speak plainly to each other, they're very honest and clear to each other. And they hear each other, they understand each other, they've been through so much together. There was a definite, very, very close connection between her and her husband, as would be expected in this poem, but she's very, very appreciative of that. But still, she wants that kind of romance back. She wants to return to him in this image we're given this of him on a bridge over the Ira River with snow on his shoulders, and it's kind of a cinematic Hollywood type of image, okay, and that is what she's craving, that kind of romance back again. So if we look at a few notes along this section of the poem, the tone of the poem becomes darker when the illness of the child is mentioned. There's definitely hardship and darkness in the past for this couple. The poet continues to make reference to ancient Greek mythology. This theme pervades the poem, throughout the entire poem. It keeps coming up, she keeps bringing up this imagery of the epic poetry of the ancient Greeks. Perhaps she is stating that to her, their relationship is as wonderful as this epic poem, as these epic stories from the past. Perhaps this is a compliment. She's saying our story is so important to her. Or we could be looking at as I've already said, we could be looking at the universality aspect of it. She tells us that she does not know what might have happened to them had their child not survived. Okay, so she's using again the reference to Greek mythology, and she's talking about how people, not knowing how to speak sometimes about the difficult parts of life. And she doesn't know what would have happened to them. So even though they speak, she says later that they speak plainly, perhaps they're not speaking about the most important thing. There's simplicity then when she says, "I am your wife. It was years ago." There's simplicity and definiteness to this, definity to this tone in these short lines. This really stands out. She is fighting for their relationship. "I am your wife. It was years ago. Our child is healed. We love each other still." Right? She is stating the facts as she sees them, and we see a clear desire from her to have to improve the relationship she feels needs to be improved upon. They've been together for a long time, and they understand each other much better because of this. There's a suggestion that the turbulence of the early relationship is gone, but they live and still love each other. Okay? But perhaps this kind of more banal life is actually quite difficult for them in a new way, and they need to learn to communicate to each other in a new way. However, she says that she does want to go back to this. She would love to go back to this time when they first met and the romance and everything like that. But she is also a realist, and we'll see as we go into the rest of the poem why, that maybe while she might desire this, she's not expectant of it. In the notice, what we notice here, so the questions there, what do we know about the structure of the fourth stanza, and that is those two short lines. She'd definitely be able to talk about that in answering on Boland. What might she want to return? Why might she want to return to the early stage of the relationship? And that could be back just to the romance and the excitement, and the fact that maybe she didn't realise in the early stage of the relationship that they weren't disclosing everything, and now she feels that because life is not quite as dramatic, she feels the things that are not being talked about. How has the poet matured and developed in the course of the relationship? She is willing to accept the banality of life and accept the plainness, and she wants to see the true side of him. She doesn't want just the romances. She wants to really know him in a plain, simple way and know everything about who he is. So if we move on to the last three stanzas. I see you as a hero in a text, the image blazing and the edges gilded, and I long to cry out the epic question, my dear companion. Will we ever live so intensely again? Will love come to us again and be so formidable at rest, it offered us ascension even to look at him? The words are shadows and you cannot hear me. You walk away and I cannot follow. So what is she asking in the second last stanza? What are the questions she's asking here? And what do you think is happening to their relationship at the end? So again, read through these few stanzas, pause the video for a second, and get to grips with what's going on here. Really come up with your own ideas about these last few stanzas. Alright, so in the second last stanza, will we ever love so intensely again? What she's asking here is, will they ever get back to just the immensity of emotions at the beginning of a relationship, or will everything be this more mundane style of life from now on? She wants to kind of bring back energy maybe to their love. Will love come to us again and be so formidable at rest it offers ascension even to look at him? Will we feel such joy at our love ever again? Or are we just going to be acceptant of what we have now? Excuse me. What do you think is happening to the relationship at the end of the poem? There seems to be a feeling that things are moving apart, and that he is drifting away from her, and she cannot come after him. And that although perhaps she is calling out to him, maybe he doesn't recognise the call. I would steer away from saying that she's blaming him or in any way for this, but she's feeling that they are drifting apart and becoming more separate because they are not discussing things. The words are shadows. The words are not having the effect. You cannot hear me. Right? So maybe she's not saying you won't hear me, she's saying he cannot hear me. And he walks away, but she can't follow him. Okay, so there's a definite feeling and a definite, possibly a fear of this separation, possibly. It's looking at the new side of the relationship, how it's happening with it. A few notes then to go alongside this. She romanticizes the way her husband was when they first met and remembers the best parts of him. Okay, she gives us a very idyllic, and she's conscious of this. She says, I see you as a hero in a text. Okay, that's what she's seen him as at the start of the relationship. Now she's maybe looking at him in a more realistic way and seeing him as human and forgiving him for not being perfect, for not being the perfect image of the man on the bridge, for not being the perfect hero from the ancient texts. Maybe she is now seeing him more as a human, and she maybe, it's a partnership that they were to work with together, that she sees him more as a realistic person than she might have at the start, and than we do at the start of very romantic relationships. It's important that she uses the term "my dear companion." This is reiterating her love for him. Okay, be very, very careful. While there is some kind of, the emotions that are somewhat dampened in the poem, she still very much loves him. Okay, and we can't forget that. This is not a poem about breaking up or anything like that. It's not a poem saying she wants to leave him. Absolutely not. She still very much loves him. She keeps reiterating that throughout. She wonders, will she ever feel the passion she felt at the beginning of the relationship again? Maybe there's a sense of loss in the fact that the romance and the passion might be gone. And again, she personifies love as being something that acts upon them. Will love ever come to us again? Okay, it's love is giving the actions. Okay, so it's giving a lot of power to the idea of love. The image of her calling to him. So, the words are shadows and you cannot hear me. This is bringing back to the idea of Orpheus in Eurydice. So part of this myth was that Orpheus, when he went to Hades, the king of the underworld, he was told, I'll give Eurydice to you. He would give him back his great love, but he was to leave the underworld without looking back, and to trust that Eurydice was behind him, and they would not be able to speak to each other or see each other until they had left the underworld. Okay. Unfortunately, Orpheus doesn't make it the whole way, and he does look back, and as he looks back, Eurydice is torn away from him and pulled back into the depths of the underworld, into the depths of the afterlife. And so maybe this is she's referring here again to this myth, and that that she's trying to keep up with him, but he can't hear her, and they can't communicate properly. Okay, so another allusion back to that Greek myth. At the end of the poem, she accepts the fact that her husband is no longer the hero she once seen him as. Okay? Life has changed them both, and they cannot strive for the past, but must move forward. And this is not by any means her saying she wants to end a relationship. Okay? Don't misinterpret this. She's just saying that they need to move and adapt to this new relationship, the new dynamic of their relationship. But remember, she keeps reiterating the deep love she still has for him. So you might want to think, how has her husband changed, and what do you think has caused this change? Right, now we know that time has passed. We know that they've been through very difficult times in their lives, and it may just be the natural progression, but it may be an effect of the difficulties what they've gone through. So there's a number of aspects in there. If we look through the poem, we can see that the romance, it's a long time they've been together. Perhaps just her impression of his original romanticism or original romantic actions are somewhat gone. But it could be an effect of the difficulties they went through with the child being sick. Do you think she is happy with their relationship at the end of the poem? There is a sense that she still very much wants to be in a relationship. She's still definitely in love with her husband, but there's maybe she is still exploring and trying to find her way through the relationship, but she is willing to work on the relationship to make sure that they achieve the relationship stays strong. Okay, so the way you think about this poem, there's a few, you need to, go and think about it yourself. So a few questions you might want to think about. You might want to think about writing paragraphs for each of these. Why has the poet referred to Greek mythology throughout this poem? If you can bring in that kind of technical aspect and the use of allusion there, it's going to be very, very strong in terms of how you're writing about and responding to Boland as a poet. And how has the relationship of the poet and her husband changed over the years they've been together? So you're looking at the structure, that's how the narrative develops through the poem. Okay, and very much this is a very, very personal poem, and we know that Boland talks about both the personal and the public, so we can use this in examples of anything to do with her personal poetry.